Welcome back to Progressively Incorrect. My name is Dr. Zach Groeschel, and my guest today is literacy expert Stephanie Stollar. Stephanie is one of my go-to sources for science of reading insights because of her ability to break down technical and complex topics and turn them into actionable steps for practitioners. I will be talking with Stephanie about the misconceptions that surround MTSS, or the multi-tiered system of supports framework, and how to problem solve as a school to ensure that all students receive the dosage of high-quality instruction that they need. Before we head over to Stephanie, I wanted to ask if you do me a favor. Are you a fan of this show and wish that more of your colleagues could access this sort of content? Well, I provide training and consulting services to schools around the science of learning and explicit instruction. All you have to do is send your principal or PD person my training page, and we can plan professional development around cognitive load theory, feedback, retrieval practice, and all the rest of the ingredients of effective teaching. Please see the show notes for more information. This podcast is brought to you by John Catt Educational, which publishes some of the best books in education. I'm going to be doing one last plug here for their online cognitive science conference on May 8th, 2024. I will be there presenting on the art and science of explaining stuff. So come say hi and listen to me rant in what might be the last chance to hear this popular presentation. Tickets are still available, so check out the show notes for more details. Now, without further ado, let's roll the tape of my interview with Dr. Stephanie Stollar. Welcome, Stephanie, to the podcast. Super excited you can talk to us and my listeners. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Zach. Thanks so much for inviting me to talk with you.
How about you start by introducing yourself, kind of telling us what you do?
So my name is Stephanie Stollar. I have been in education for more than 30 years in a variety of roles. I consider myself to be a cheerleader for teachers and other educators. I do a lot of professional development, and I am working half-time as an assistant professor in the reading science program at Mount St. Joseph University. I have an online course on MTSS, and I have an online membership community called the Reading Science Academy.
Nice. And I've checked out the Reading Science Academy as a participant. Let's start here because I think this is just so important. Like, how do you see like kind of the science of learning movement kind of growing and evolving in online spaces? Because you gather all these folks on the Reading Science Academy and you've seen kind of how it's going. How do you say it's progressing at this moment?
Well, I feel pretty optimistic, actually, about it. I've spent my career trying to bridge research to practice. That's kind of what I see my role as. And I started the Reading Science Academy because I was seeing online on social media during COVID a lot of teachers who had a sense that their knowledge was incomplete and that the way that they wanted to show up for kids in their classrooms was lacking, that there was something else out there. They were hearing about it as the science of reading. They didn't really know what that was, but they had always had a sense that they could get better results for their students. And there was a lot of confusion for people. These people who were interested, willing to learn, wanted to do things differently, they didn't really know where to go. So I created the Reading Science Academy to be a community of people who wanted to learn what was in the reading research, but wanted support to apply it to their work. They wanted a place where they could go for trusted information, where the information was vetted, where they would get clear and direct answers to their questions, and where they could connect with other people just like themselves who were at various places on the journey of learning about the science of reading. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do. I create new content for the members every single week. It's not a course. It's more like, HelloFresh for the educator, where it's responsive to what they are interested in. So the content each week is in response to their questions, the topics that they're interested in, the struggles they're having with their students. So I create summaries of research. I bring guest speakers. I translate what's in the research into tools, checklists, routines, things that they can actually implement in their work with students. And the progress that people have made that I've been able to be a part of and observe the change in people has been amazing. So I think that's what fills me with hope, that with a little bit of information, a little bit of direction, teachers are moving forward and really getting results for their students. So um, it's been a joy for me actually to get connected to people in that way.
And I feel like, I mean, maybe you think this too. I feel like we might be on phase two, where it was like phase one was just get oriented, and maybe it was a sort of a phonics focused kind of movement, phase one. And now we're into the point where actually like some of the maybe some of the more complex questions, those questions that are on the edges right now, are kind of gaining some traction amongst teachers. Um, maybe like what if you had to name some things that you wish every teacher who already knows that phonics is important but hasn't gone to the next step, like what would those things be?
Oh gosh. Well, understanding that phonics is not all there is, obviously, is an important first understanding. Understanding about language comprehension and the relationship between language comprehension and decoding. Um, that's an important understanding. I think people latch onto phonics initially when they learn about reading science because it's the piece that they weren't prepared to teach well. They weren't really getting good results in. And it's a little bit more discrete and something you can get your hands around, like there's a beginning and an end, a kind of a clear sequence to learning letter sound relationships. Language comprehension doesn't work that way. So I think you're right in describing it as like a next phase that people are going deeper and they're understanding now some of that complexity that is in language comprehension, what those skills and capacities even are, and that we don't know as much about how to teach them directly and explicitly. Um, I think that one of the other things that is really essential for teachers and other educators to understand, not just from reading science, but from the science of learning, is the instructional hierarchy, the learning hierarchy. This is one of the concepts from cognitive science that we have withheld from teachers, I think, and maybe not intentionally. That makes it sound like it was intentional, but we have not given them the benefit of understanding this sequence of learning something complex from first doing it correctly and accurately, then to doing it automatically and effortlessly, to then being able to apply and generalize that new skill or knowledge to other passages, other complex problems. That just understanding of how learning happens has so many applications in schools, not just to reading, but specifically to reading. And it's that kind of learning that I see people now being open to and interested in. So it's not just about like the essential components, the big five of early literacy. It's not just about phonics, but people are now willing to dig into and are asking questions about human learning and about behavior and about how do we acquire knowledge and what is the purpose of reading and how is knowledge building connected to reading. And I think that's exciting. Those are all next frontiers, I think, for education.
And I didn't want to be one of those people in this to try to undermine the science of reading movement. Like a lot of people actually that I respect kind of did that. Like right when Sold Story came out, they wanted to be the first person to jump up and say, but it's not only phonics. And we were like, yeah, I don't think Emily Hanford is saying that. I think this is very much talking about a failure to use phonics in classrooms.
Yes.
But that was the thing I wanted to stand up and say, but I didn't, which was that and maybe this is because I'm an upper elementary teacher, which was that we also have to appreciate expert novice differences. We have to appreciate cognitive load and spacing. And there's an
Yes.
instructional design out there that is being withheld and or only kept in certain courses for very specialty courses in education, in universities. Um,
Yeah.
but I mentioned something there about the expert novice, and that's kind of the instructional hierarchy. What do you mean by that in terms of teaching reading?
Wow. Okay. So I really love to be able to talk to you about this because I think about these things a lot. These are not things that I necessarily share because I feel like I'm still developing my thoughts about this. So this is just like initial um, reactions. But maybe there are two categories of how I would approach this. So this knowledge that I mentioned about the learning hierarchy or the instructional hierarchy could be so beneficial to teachers if they could have that schema in mind, that progression of going from accuracy to automaticity to generalization. They could look at their students, individual students, a whole class of students, and use assessments to place children on that sequence or hierarchy of learning. And then they could be so much more targeted and therefore effective if they matched their reading instruction to where children were on that hierarchy or sequence within the skills that they're teaching. So, for example, rather than asking children to read a grade level selection and discuss it with a group, or read a grade level selection and write about it, maybe that is two steps down the road from where an individual or group of students actually are with their reading skills. If students are still acquiring the word recognition skills, if they're still working out the code, but you're asking them to generalize the code, read the text fluently, and apply it to some complex task like writing, your instruction is actually misaligned to where the student's skills are. And a lot of frustration on everybody's part is going to ensue in that environment. But I don't think we give teachers that framework and way of looking at their students, using data to match what students need to their instruction. And so then we end up with all of this time spent in a not very effective way. So that's one category of how that sort of framework schema could be, that knowledge could be really useful to teachers. I think this relates to the whole, what people call reading wars, like the whole, direct instruction, teacher-led instruction versus balanced literacy constructivist approach. At the root of that, and the root, I think, lies in teacher preparation, comes from, in my experience, in my view, teacher educators preparing folks to think that that application and generalization step is where they should start. And so one of the ways that this comes out is in, a balanced literacy approach where the belief is that children will learn to read by reading. And this manifests in practices like in kindergarten, students being given text before they actually know how to read. And they're expected to be guided to read before they can actually read the words, right? Like it's the behavior of reading that is believed to cause the skill of reading. I don't know. That's just something that I've observed that I think is connected to this this learning hierarchy. It's a misapplication, a misunderstanding of where kids are in learning new and complex skills. To even sort of generalize it even more within teacher preparation, there, in my experience, there's not a lot of belief or understanding that it's the teacher's role to cause the learning. It's the teacher's role to set up the environment for the learning to actually happen. There's a lot of persistent belief about reading being something that is natural, and the teacher's job is to just sort of nurture it to come out of the child. It exists in there, and you just have to get the environment right for it to blossom and come out. which leaves teachers feeling really defeated when students struggle with reading. If the locus of control is all outside of you as the educator, if you believe this is a natural process, if you've been told that you should not intervene in this natural process, that you should just let it evolve out of the child, then you feel really defeated and out of control if a student struggles with reading it, and you might be inclined to wash your hands of it because there's nothing you can do. It's just internal to the child. It's the child's problem. Um, so I don't know, I'm rambling, but I think these are all sort of related issues that have really gotten in our way in education and reading specifically. This whole misunderstanding about constructivism, its place in education, what the teacher's role is in the classroom, especially related to reading. It's been very damaging, in my opinion. It's really gotten us into a lot of trouble, and it's turned a lot of people away from teaching because they have not been effective. And every teacher goes into education because they want to change the world. They want to change lives for children through school. And when they can't actualize that, they can't experience it, they often leave. And so I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm interested in your reaction to my rambling.
Well, the an early version of this podcast that's named before I came up with progressively incorrect was constructive criticism.
Oh,
And,
okay.
but there were several podcasts already that had that name. So anyway, I totally agree. I want to add something to that because I think that's easy to understand for young for early years too, where
Mm,
you're like, that's almost it's like a choice a bit with the teacher or a mindset around, you know, at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. Oh, I got this group of kids who are have way too many different abilities, so I'm just gonna kind of teach to the middle and let it, you know, and so
yeah.
on. But when you get up to the middle school where I am, you get teachers who are told to read this novel, and they look out on their students and they see that they are not fluent readers, that their vocabulary is very low. Some of them are even struggling with phonics that are not identified for special education.
Mhm.
Um, and they just they don't know what to do, and so they've never been trained in this early stuff, and it seems like they're cheating or they're doing the wrong thing by maybe going back and digging into some elementary materials, so they just keep persisting, and
Yeah.
it's kind of awful because it's subverting the instructional hierarchy we just talked about,
Yes.
you know.
Yes. Yes. And it creates sort of a learned helplessness in the teachers. It's really it's very tragic actually, because like I said, teachers want to be effective. They want their children to learn, their students to learn. But if you're not equipped with, call it a mindset or an understanding or a set of tools and skills uh, to be effective, if you don't have the right information and the right materials, then and structures around you, uh, then a natural survival mechanism is going to be to put it outside of yourself, right? Like it's something about these kids, or it's out of my control. And it doesn't have to be that way, right? It doesn't have to be that way. We as a profession, as a system, we have not properly equipped educators with what they need to be effective. And I guess that's what I'm struggling against is to make that happen for teachers, because it's totally possible. We know too much to be getting the outcomes that we're getting, and to leave teachers with this helpless feeling. It just doesn't have to be this way. So
Well, I appreciate everything you said, and you said you were rambling, but I that's not true. You're very well spoken in in this subject. I wanted to move to the next question around MTSS, and Tier One in particular. Maybe what is missing or possibly misunderstood around discussions of MTSS multi-tiered systems of support, formerly RTI.
Mm.
So what do you think is sort of misunderstood when it comes to this topic?
Well, this is my favorite topic to talk about. And like Anita Archer has taught me, if there's misunderstanding or lack of learning, then the teacher has not taught. And so I take this on myself. I take responsibility for this because I've been talking about these topics for 30 years. So when I say that there are misunderstandings about MTSS, I'm saying me personally and my colleagues who've been doing this work for a long time have not clearly communicated this. So what I'm recognizing as misunderstandings, and I'll give you a list, is because these ideas have not been clearly communicated. Okay, so I just want to take ownership for that. So what people I think largely today don't understand are some of the foundations of why the MTSS model was first conceptualized. And you said formerly RTI. When I first started implementing what we now call MTSS, it was an integrated model, academic and behavior supports. It came from public health, this idea of prevention, because we know the commonality across academic and behavioral issues is prevention. We can actually prevent most reading and behavioral problems in schools. We've got the research base to do that. And yet the way we were behaving in schools in the 70s and 80s was mostly a wait to fail approach. So MTSS came from public health as a health promotion or health prevention kind of model that was applied first to positive behavior support and then to academic support, reading specifically. And that whole concept of prevention is not really being actualized today. So when people today say that they are doing MTSS, what they mean often is they're doing some kind of intervention system. They're doing some kind of series of interventions. Often people are doing those interventions en route to special education. They are perhaps doing universal screening, but only to identify students who are at risk and provide intervention to those at-risk students. And all of that might be part of MTSS, but it's not the most important part. They're skipping over and missing what I think is the most important part of MTSS, which is the prevention part. So I focus mostly on the reading aspects and early reading in particular. And so what I'm trying to elevate as a misunderstanding and bring to people's conscious awareness is that the best way to intervene is to prevent. So the best way to be effective with an intervention system is to not have very many kids who need intervention. And that sounds like I'm trying to be cute with language or something, but it's actually the fact that you can't provide intensive intervention for students who have disabilities like dyslexia, for example, if you have a whole bunch of kids who need intervention. And so the way that many people are currently implementing MTSS has them just scurrying around trying to improve their intervention system while they are keeping tier 1 classroom reading instruction the same. So this is the missed opportunity, I think. And the alternative that I'm trying to advocate for is use your screening data to evaluate the effectiveness of your first reading instruction in tier 1. Use your screening data and diagnostic reading data too to engineer a tier 1 system that is lined up to the needs of your students. It's so lined up with what your students need that it causes the vast majority of students to reach your grade level expectations. That's the way I was brought up, so to speak, with understanding what MTSS is all about. And I think we've gotten away from that. I hear a lot of, especially school administrators, talking about what I think is a common misunderstanding, that just because all students get tier 1 instruction, they think that means all students should get the same instruction in tier 1. I hear a lot of mandates for 90 to 120 minutes of all whole group instruction, where everybody is getting only instruction that matches grade level standards. And they're talking about that as access and equity. And it just doesn't ring true to me with what I understand about MTSS, and I don't see it actually work, which is the bottom line of everything related to MTSS. It's a school change model. It's about changing and improving outcomes. And if what you're currently doing, whole group grade level instruction for 90 minutes, isn't working to accelerate learning and catch kids up, then maybe you should think about doing something different. So that's what I'm trying to bring to people's awareness, because I think that's the most common misunderstanding right now floating around about MTSS. And it is the most important thing for people to change, in my opinion.
I totally agree. That let me tell you how kind of there's actually some internal debates around how to use this tier 1 instruction. You mentioned one, which is that the teacher teaches whole group. I often the positive words I hear associated that with I scaffold up or I teach to the top. I have high expectations, right? And that you just kind of talked about, like, perhaps some of the downsides to that. But then there's these other two. I'll just try to say them briefly. There's one where the teacher uses a screener, and the screener, the pre-test puts the students into instruction at their level, and perhaps the students walk to read, or maybe in a younger classroom, there's 3 groups, and maybe 2 paras take 2 groups, and I take 1 group, right? And we get students to work on stuff at their level. That model, we know, that I personally do with direct instruction. That model really works, but it's very unpopular. It doesn't seem like that many
I hear
people
you.
do it. Uh, um, uh, and then there's this third one, which I think is I think the worst of all worlds. And I'll just say what it is. And that's where the teacher splinters instruction so much, trying to constantly meet kids where they are, that we almost have 30 lesson plans at some point in time. We have the teacher running around like a chicken with their head cut off, putting out fires, and no one's getting time with the teacher for explicit instruction. It's maybe now that I've laid out the 3, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I see a lot of what you mentioned as the first approach. I see a lot of whole group instruction and then maybe a small group lesson as a follow-up. And that's problematic, because what are the other kids doing while that one teacher is with the small group? And what was that student who's struggling doing during the whole group lesson, right? Like either they're acting out, trying to avoid it, or sitting quietly thinking about something else, right? It's just not a good use of time. I am a huge fan of direct instruction. So the second approach that you mentioned is much more in line with what I have guided districts to do, what I've seen work well in schools. Fortunately, I haven't seen as much of the third design that you mentioned, but I understand how problematic that is. So a couple of things that I would say from my experience: what the school should do, what the grade level should do, in my opinion, should be based on the needs of the students. So I don't have a, dogmatic approach to which structure or model should you implement in your tier 1. I think you should decide as a building and as a grade level team what model is going to work best for your students. And it's probably going to depend on what grade level you're in. Because in kindergarten and first grade, if you start with what you described as model 2, if you start with that kind of differentiation, and not just at the classroom level, but across the whole grade, everybody is getting instruction that's matched to their skill level. And they are getting, some of them, a double dose of that. So extra time, in small group targeted at their needs. It's possible to have just about every student, if not every student, leave first grade reading text for meaning. Like, I've seen that happen. That absolutely can happen. So I think what I would like to see is more team level decision making using data about students to design the structures that their students need, rather than just saying MTSS tier 1 is this or it's that. I want to see people choosing the approach and the structure and the grouping that is lined up with what their students need. So what I've seen to be most effective is when the entire grade level, everybody who serves the grade level, classroom teachers, paras, special educators, remedial reading staff, school psychs, SLPs, principals, coaches, everybody who serves the grade level sits down together with student data, and they literally lay out in groups, skill-based groups, what students need. And then they decide, how are we as the adults who work with this grade level going to organize ourselves to meet the needs of these students? What does our tier 1 structure need to look like? Mostly around the word recognition skills in the younger grades. We can do whole group language comprehension instruction. That's where it's really beneficial to have heterogeneous groupings. We're doing that mainly through explicit read aloud, building content knowledge, lots of classroom discussion. That's much easier to do through a whole group format. But for the word recognition piece, if we have a wide range of skills, we're going to have to divide and conquer. And if we match what we're teaching to where students are on that learning hierarchy in a scope and sequence of phonics and decoding skills, we will be able to accelerate them much faster than if we are teaching to the whole, or even sort of scaffolding a whole group lesson. We're going to be able to move kids, catch them up, get them back to grade level faster and easier if we are targeting instruction to their skill need. Now, this is going to happen in tier 1, but some of the most struggling or behind students are going to need another dose of that. We know in the reading research that we can catch kids up. We can accelerate their learning, but not with the same number of instructional minutes. It's going to take more time in the school day. So that's what the tiered model is all about. That's why it's shaped like a triangle, is what I like to say. So everybody's getting this first dose of differentiated, skill-based group targeted instruction. And some kids, not everybody, but some kids are going to get a second dose of that as tier 2 or tier 3. And that's what's going to give them enough minutes, enough practice opportunities, enough time to actually close the gap and catch up. And the sooner we do it, the easier it is and more likely to happen. And I mean sooner, like in kindergarten or first grade. If we're trying to do this in the intermediate grades or in high school, it can be done, but the amount of time in the school day it's going to take is tremendous. And most buildings are just not structured to make that happen. So I don't know if you have thoughts about my reaction to your comments.
I have a lot of thoughts.
Okay, good.
How do I organize them so that we can share the airtime? The first bit, I'll just say about what you said last, which was that these kids, some kids are going to need more instruction.
Yes.
It should seem obvious to anyone who has a child or has met a person that some students are going to need more, and that is the most empathetic, kind thing you can do to someone, is to not say that you're locked in for 40 minutes just like your more advantaged peers gets 40 minutes. However, the argument always comes up and the principals feel like they're shackled, is that I can't take away some other opportunity like PE or like social studies or whatever it is, art, because that opportunity is just as important. I just think that the core mission of schools is to teach everybody to read. And that's
Well, I couldn't agree more. And so, if you start out again in kindergarten and first grade with these kinds of systems in place, with making and designing systems based on what kids need, then you eliminate a lot of these problems later on, right? Um, so to accomplish this, I've seen schools do a variety of things. So in some cases, schools will make decisions. So the problem, again, restating what you just said, is that kids are going to have to miss something else during the school day to get this extra dose of reading intervention. So I've seen schools accomplish this in a variety of ways. They're all legitimate, in my opinion. Some schools create like a, a block of time that is available at the grade level for intervention or enrichment or group work or whatever. It could be intervention for academics or behavior or enrichment. So there's a common time during the school day where everybody's getting something. And that's where you're giving that extra dose of reading intervention. In other schools, I've seen them very skillfully integrate science and social studies standards and objectives into their ELA block so that that is done in a very integrated way. And so you don't have that time that kids are missing for those other content areas. In some schools, I've seen them prioritize with family members what is most important. And again, this is much easier to do in kindergarten and first grade, or even in second and third grade. For some students, missing PE is tragic. Like it's really going to throw off their day. They need that physical movement, to function and so forth. It's the highlight of their day. It's where they're most successful. So that family with that individual child wouldn't make that choice to miss PE. Other kids could give a rip about PE. And so that becomes, a viable option. In some cases, they are extending the school day for certain students before school, after school. I guess my point is there are a variety of ways to accomplish this. And when the main objective is to act on this research that shows us kids who are struggling are going to need more and better instruction, then it just becomes a matter of the problem solving group, the group that's getting together, in this case about an individual student, and that includes their family members, for them to make the decision and choice about how are we going to accomplish this. And at the school level, as they're planning what's our tier 2 system for reading support going to look like, they're doing the same thing. They're looking at their local resources, their local challenges, and they're making that local decision. This is not an area where I think administrators or policymakers should set out blanket mandates. The mandate should be that stakeholders should get together with a database decision-making process and figure this out with their local context. If you're going to mandate anything, that would be the piece to mandate.
And the other thing that I think about, because this problem-solving team, which is this is what MTSS is, right?
It's central to MTSS.
Like that is not within the culture of many schools, and
many are not even doing it.
And we might blame the top, right? We have a principal coming in who didn't instill those values of collective teamwork, and the buck stops with us, folks. I will teach on period 6 when I'm done with parents, and our secretary will be making sure that we get these schedules out, master schedules out.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't exist everywhere. And I wonder sometimes if I wonder why that is.
Well, again, I'm going to take ownership. We don't talk about that when we talk about MTSS. We don't elevate and make central to the model that I call it problem solving, that database decision making aspect. Or if we do, because I think some people have done a really good job of this, like the Meadows Center, Sharon Vaughn's group. But it's talked about only for the individual student problem solving, only in that like intervention assistance team kind of model. we need to do it there. We need team-based problem solving around individual students, but we also need to be applying that database decision making to getting our systems in place, right? So that's what I'm talking about in terms of designing, engineering what your tier one, what your tier two system should look like. And I'm just going to connect it back to our conversation earlier about constructivism, honestly, that, if teachers are taught from day one of their preparation programs that they shouldn't intervene, that they shouldn't be directing the learning and directing how kids are behaving in the classroom, then they're not even in the mindset of we should get together as a group and design and direct what the learning environment should look like. It's not even, they just aren't even conceptualizing it. So a huge missed opportunity. That problem solving decision making model is the backbone of MTSS. Most places will tell you that they're doing MTSS, but you ask them about their leadership teams at the various levels of the system, they don't have them. Or if they do have the teams, they're doing some kind of, loosey-goosey, wishy-washy conversation or just problem admiration when they get together in those teams. They're not actually working through a structure. This is, I think, an area of the science of reading that we really need to have more conversations about. It's something that I've been thinking about in terms of the science part of the phrase science of reading. It's thinking scientifically that we haven't prepared educators to do. We're talking now a lot about the gap between research and practice, between scientists and educators. I think we could help close that gap if we were preparing and supporting educators to think more scientifically. If we prepared them with what problem solving is to me is the scientific method. It's hypothesis testing. It's what we teach fourth graders in science class. That's what it is. And we need more science in the science of reading. We need people who are thinking scientifically about the problems in front of them, that they are taking a scientific approach to collecting data, asking questions, using assessments to answer those questions. They are thinking scientifically about what are the possible solutions when we have this type of a problem, thinking scientifically about collecting ongoing data to see if our action resolved the concern that we were experiencing, and cycling back if we didn't resolve the concern. So that whole, scientific method, that's the process that I'd like to see us elevate. It's the heart, the backbone, the foundation of MTSS. It's the way to think about and what to think about that drives that three-tiered model. And I just don't think we have elevated that conversation enough. So I appreciate the opportunity to go on and on about some of these things.
And I think I want to add that I think a lot of this has to come down to, because if you're a scientist, a lot of it comes down to measurement. And
Yes.
if you're not measuring what you want to see, or you don't care what the results are. I'll give an example. Had a student who did not pass the threshold of 90% or whatever it was on the mastery test, right? My
Yep.
materials tell me that means they require remediation. But if
Yep.
they require remediation, I can't remediate them while I have the rest of the group. We have to meet with this child, right? And so to
Right.
say, and I was saying this in a meeting, what are we gonna do, right? And the group is like, yeah, that kid is just so low. The kid is so low, and you have to wonder, right? You have to wonder, like, if we could change our entire mindset around, like, we have to act and we have to measure and we have to actually get these kids up and
Yeah.
accelerate them.
Yeah. And so sometimes in those instances, I've had many experiences like what you just described, and you're pulling your hair out. You're like, wait a minute, somebody, help me help this kid. If you can get a small example to show people. So I used learned helplessness earlier, and I'm not sure that's right, but what you're saying, where people are like wringing their hands, like, yeah, he's so low. People they're genuinely troubled by that, but they also genuinely don't know what else to do, right? So sometimes you have to let them experience the something else. So if you can take one of those students, you might have experience like that with, a dozen that you're working with. If you can get an opportunity to experience and demonstrate something different with one student, like if you can say to that team, let me have another 30 minutes. He's going to miss whatever it is during the day. Let me have another 30 minutes, collect some data, see if that makes a difference. When people experience that, not just talking about it, because they don't have a repertoire, a knowledge base from which to draw the solution. So if you can demonstrate something different, a different outcome, it opens up people's thinking and it makes it more possible for them to think, okay, if we were able to pull that off for this one student, how might we make that happen for 6 or a dozen or 120 students who are scoring in the same way? Like, I don't know, it just wiggles something loose in people if they can see a demonstration of something different on a small scale. It lets them think more creatively about getting to a broader solution.
Yeah, and I try to I have to do some persuasion, because we don't have that culture. I have to meet with the PE teacher and say, look, I know you have to grade this kid,
Yeah,
but I will help you figure that out, right? We'll do it together. We'll figure out how to grade this kid. Your class is going to be a little smaller today, right?
yeah,
So you can really meet with some smaller groups and have some more relationships. But we can't let this kid keep struggling on,
yeah. Yeah, and it comes down to the building leadership. The building leaders have to be thinking in the way that you're describing. They have to not just give permission for that innovation to happen, but actually set up the conditions for it. And they also can't be doing things that work against it, like saying, "Well, it's April 10th, so we have to be on lesson 64." So I don't. It's too bad that this most of your group hasn't gotten to the 90% threshold. It's April 10th. So, we're going to lesson 65 tomorrow. Like those kinds of policies and mandates and messages, explicit and implicit, from school leaders really work against the kind of thing that we're talking about. So we need to get those folks on board. We need to help them balance, because they're getting messages from their higher ups too. So we have to get everybody in the system talking about what they know would be a better way of working for kids, and not thinking about MTSS as just a different set of hoops to work through on a route to special education, but a way of recognizing if we would do business differently. And everybody's got a list in their head of, if I could wave a magic wand and change this about my school, if I was queen or king for the day in my school, this is what I would change. Everybody knows what those things are. If we just sat down together and said, what could we do different in our school to get a different result for our students, and really let that spark the conversation, put that into the database decision making model, I think we could make some progress. We could get some growth in the right direction.
Perfect. And I think we should end on this question because it's within the MTSS framework, but maybe people don't realize which is the other side, which is behavior.
Mm.
And I've had a few behaviorists on this podcast lately. They're like, dude, it's all behavior, right? But when we're talking about classroom management and structures and PBIS, maybe you can speak to the integration of PBIS and reading improvement.
Yeah, thanks. Because this is, again, a place where I feel a little guilty, because I focus on reading and I focus on early literacy, just, self-preservation and my own interests. I think that's where we can be most effective. But the MTSS model is about the integration of academic and behavior support, because reading specifically and behavior are so intertwined. And if you stop and think about kids who are in front of you, kids who you actually work with and know about, you understand how intertwined they are. The entry point can be, well, let me say it this way, that students who are struggling with reading very often have behavior difficulties as well. And it can start at either point. Students who have difficulty with social, emotional, and behavioral aspects of being in school, whether that's attention span or it is something related to anxiety and depression, if it starts as a behavioral issue, that will eventually, over time, become an academic problem, a reading problem, because there's something about those behaviors that is causing them to miss instruction, to just put it bluntly. Or it can start as a reading difficulty. Students who have reading difficulties over time, as they go up in the grade levels, often end up with behavioral difficulties. They're trying to avoid academic work that's too difficult for them. They're trying to escape embarrassment of being called on to read in class, et cetera, et cetera. So these aspects of children's lives in schools are very interrelated. And we don't always acknowledge that. We tend to look at these as separate problems. And what you said about it's all behavior is actually true, in my opinion, that we need to be approaching the social aspects of being in school and the academic aspects from being behavioral, where we can analyze the elements of appropriate and inappropriate behavior. We can influence the environment to promote, whether it's academic or social behaviors. We can understand when we're seeing low academic performance or inappropriate behaviors. We can understand them from a behavioral perspective that allows us as the adults to approach it as learning, so that we can actually teach students the academic skills, and we can teach them those pro-social behaviors as well. So it gives us much more power as the adults. It gives us a lot of agency. It gives us ways to be effective with students. And it lets us understand that these are not separate initiatives in our schools. I see this too often. We have a behavior committee or initiative, a PBIS team, and we have some kind of, these days, science of reading team or initiative, or dyslexia team, or even academic MTSS team. We need to bring these things together. We need to understand how they are related. We need to be talking about them in an integrated way. And I'm going to go back to what is central to both of those topics, academic and behavior supports, is prevention. Our very best opportunity is to prevent the misbehavior, to prevent the academic failure from happening in the first place, rather than always trying to react to what happens in an intervention perspective. So to me, that's where the MTSS model is so powerful, is in that integration and integration of the academic and behavior support for all students in the entire school system.
Absolutely. And that's the strength of taking, I think, the behavioral approach, is that just like you say, if you didn't learn, I didn't teach. It's the same thing as saying if they didn't learn, it's not because they have dyslexia or that they're a bad kid, they have ADHD or whatever. Always the course of action for the professional is to say, what can I do to change the environment?
Yes.
And if you just, like you said, empowering, that to me was like a huge light bulb.
Well, I'm just going to admit that, as I said, this is a message coming from Anita Archer, one of my main mentors. This is not easy. So what I'm suggesting, this approach of being a professional in this way, taking this ownership, this is not easy. I don't find this easy. When I do a workshop for teachers, and I've spent 45 minutes explaining some kind of concept, or talking about something that I want people to learn, and someone in the group raises their hand and asks a question that I just answered 5 minutes before, I want to roll my eyes, right? Like my natural inclination is, weren't you paying attention? But no, I have to step back from that and I have to really understand that I did not teach that concept. I did not communicate that knowledge or whatever it was. It's my responsibility. That's on me. And that is not an easy thing to do. So I get it. I understand that I'm not asking educators to do something that's simple or easy for people to take on. It's very, very challenging, but I don't see another way. The alternative is not acceptable to me to just wash my hands and say, I'm sorry you're not at 90%, but we're going to lesson 65 anyway tomorrow. Like, no, we're just going to leave you in the dust. No, I can't accept it. I can't accept it for students, and I can't accept it for the educators that I work with either. So I'm trying to get over myself and do better.
Well, with that, we will end this this podcast episode. Stephanie, where can we find out more about your work? Where can listeners go to kind of sign up for some of these things and get involved?
Oh, thanks for asking that. My website is readingscienceacademy.com, and there you can link to all my social accounts. You can find information about the Reading Science Academy membership and the online MTSS course that I offer. You can reach out to me, contact me for consultation and training through that website. So I invite people to connect with me that way.
Perfect. And I will be putting these in the show notes so that listeners can follow those links. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. It was fascinating, and I now have to go out and do something about this this whole discussion, and I hope you do too. Stephanie, take care.
Thanks, Zach.